Is it better to persuade more or listen more? Most salespeople think that the key to closing deals is to say the right thing at the right time. What if the real skill isn't talking more, but it's knowing when to stop? It's the same skill that Oprah Winfrey uses in her interviews to get her guests to open up more, the same technique that the FBI uses during hostage negotiations. It's all about getting more information and letting the other person talk more. And somehow that exact skill is the thing that most salespeople ignore. Yet it's the difference between pushing a deal forward and quietly guiding someone to a decision that they actually stand behind. In sales, there's a quiet debate that's happening every single month. Some people think that you need high energy and lots of persuasion. Other people think that whoever talks the least controls the sale. So in this video, we're gonna break down the debate between persuading more and listening more. Why both sides feel right but still fail. What Oprah and FBI negotiators understand that most people miss. And if you stick around, we'll give you a framework to guide decisions without pressure. And just so you know, this is part of my Sales Myths versus Methods series. This is where we break the things that people continue to repeat and replace it with methods and tactics that actually work in real conversations. Quick context before we go any further. My name's Stephen Carroll, and I've sold $5.2 million in products over the last year in 2025. For the last 8 years, I've done both business to consumer and business to business sales. At one point, I was on the brink of getting fired because I wasn't doing a great job, and then turned that around, figured out the right way to sell, and then it added $130,000 to my income in that same year. Not by sounding smarter and talking more, but by guiding conversations instead of forcing them. If you're watching this, chances are this problem feels really familiar. Month after month, you're getting on calls where the prospect seems interested, you're having great conversations, but then the deals stall out and then never close. And then afterwards, you replay the call in your head and you start to wonder things like, did I talk too much? Did I not explain it clearly enough? Should I push harder? Some months you're trying to be more persuasive and other months you're just trying to be quieter. And the frustrating part is you don't know which one is helping and which one is hurting your sale. Most people aren't deciding wrong between those two things, they're just deciding blind. And this is where most people get stuck without realizing it, because the real damage isn't happening on the call, it's actually happening after the call. When you think persuasion is the job, you end up explaining more, pitch earlier, and try to sound convincing. So, what happens? The buyer talks less, their resistance rises, and at the exact same time, their trust drops. When you think silence is control, you nod, you wait, and nothing moves forward. Your deals stall, momentum disappears, and you tell yourself, oh yeah, they'll follow up. So you end up between pressure without trust or trust but no decision. Both feel bad and both cost you deals. Now here's the frustrating part. Most people think this is just how sales feels, but it doesn't have to. The goal isn't how do I persuade better or how do I talk less. The real goal is how do I guide decisions without pressure to get prospects to talk openly and watch their resistance and guards drop. It makes their decisions feel intentional so that the sale is owned on both sides of the conversation. Sales stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like leadership. So what's interesting is this. The answer didn't come from sales training at all. The actual answer came from places where influence really matters. Think of like a therapist. Therapists don't fix people by talking at them. They ask questions that result in self-realization because people trust conclusions that they actually come up with themselves. That's why advice is forgotten, but insight, that's what sticks. So think of it this way. Persuasion is like external pressure, but asking questions creates internal clarity. And this isn't just theory. In fact, you've actually seen this play out in real life, even if you didn't realize it at the time. Think about Oprah Winfrey. Her interviews aren't powerful because she talks a lot. They're powerful because her questions invite the truth. People open up and they go deeper. That's not charisma, that's listening, but with direction. Now take that and let's look at it in a situation where getting this right has life or death consequences. When the stakes are at their highest, like in a hostage negotiation, the FBI doesn't persuade harder, they listen harder and they seek for understanding. Former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss says, pressure escalates resistance, but listening lowers the emotional temperature. When stakes are at their highest, professionals stop persuading and start listening. Sales isn't life or death, however, the psychology behind it always remains the same. Once you see this, you can't unsee it because the pattern repeats itself, specifically in your sales conversations. So think of it this way. When you're talking to persuade, talking tries to move people. but questions let people move themselves. Buyers trust what they say more than what you say. This is what's called cognitive consistency. If the buyer verbalizes the problem, the cost of inaction, and their desired outcome, they become invested. You didn't persuade them, they persuaded themselves. So the question then becomes, how do you actually do that without becoming passive or losing control of that conversation, right? When the stakes are the highest, the FBI uses these 3 tools: mirroring, labeling, and calibrated questions. Together, these let you sound passive while remaining in control. Here's the first one: mirroring. This keeps them talking without feeling pressure. Here's how you do it. You repeat the last 1 to 3 words of what they said. So the prospect might say something like, well, we've been burned before. And then you respond, you've been burned before? No pitch, no defense, and now they open up and they tell you everything. Mirroring is how you keep momentum without adding noise. Let me give you an example of this. Early on in my tech sales career working for LinkedIn, I got so excited to sell my product that I spent so much time trying to persuade my customer. But what I learned was when I slowed down and started asking better quality questions and mirroring my customer, it got them talking like 90% of the time and helped me understand what they really cared about. So I stopped trying to tell them, hey, this is what you need, and I started asking them after they would say things like, it's too expensive. I would simply mirror, that's too expensive? And pause. And then they would always come up with clarifiers for me that I didn't even know to ask. Well, yeah, our budget's only this, and you're the biggest line item in our budget. We just don't have the money for it. So you just don't have the money for it? This line of thinking and questioning helped me get answers that I would have never gotten by just straight asking. You open them up to take the conversation where it needs to go, and then from there, they end up guiding themselves through the conversation and telling me why they end up needing the product and what I needed to do to get this deal to close. Number 2, labeling. Labeling is just a way to verbally identify that other person's emotions in a conversation, using things like, it sounds like, or so what I'm hearing is, or it seems like. And what this does is it encourages trust, it diffuses negativity, and it encourages them to just open up to you. It also makes your customer feel heard, and everyone just wants to feel heard. So when the prospect says, we need to think about this, your response might sound, so what I'm hearing is you're concerned about making the wrong decision. You don't need to be right, you just need to be close, and don't worry, because they're gonna correct you. So labeling isn't about agreement, it's about recognition of their feelings. This lowers their guard and allows them to open back up to you with more clarity and more detail. When I was working in tech sales selling talent recruitment and learning and development, I worked with a chief human resources officer who was newer to a company and very ambitious. He had big goals and wanted to tackle talent from a holistic strategy standpoint. We had the perfect solution. And after many conversations, I noticed that the actual progression of the deal, when it came time to actually signing the contract, things fell off. So here's what I did. I got back on a conversation and I used labeling. I asked where he was in his thought process and why things haven't been progressing as we planned. He started explaining away and giving me details that weren't really helpful. And then he finally said that there were some budgetary constraints. So I used labeling. So it sounds like there is some concern around budget and where you're spending money. He opened up. Well, yeah, we only have so much budget, and I've got one shot at this, and if I get this wrong, it's my job on the line. So I'm hearing that it's not just about the dollars, it's about the fear behind making the decision, making an investment, and you not getting the results that you're looking for. Then he elaborated even more as to why he was afraid, what his concerns were, and what he needed from me in order to get this deal to close. You'll notice once I labeled, this is where the emotions drop, and this is where real conversations get to that point where the customer sells themselves. And this is where most deals are actually won. Step 3, using calibrated questions in order to guide but not push conversations. Use how and what questions, but never why. So some examples are, how does this decision usually get made? What happens if this stays unresolved for like the next 6 months? How would you want this to work if it went perfectly? Calibrated questions outsource persuasion to the buyer. All right, so let's put it all together. Here's what it might actually sound like. Prospect says, you know what, this is a really big investment. And then you say, so it's a big investment? And they might say something like, well, yeah, it's a lot of money for us to give you. I mean, this is a huge dollar amount, more than we were expecting to spend. So we say, I understand. This is a large amount of your budget is what I'm hearing. They may come back with, well, yes, this is the most of my budget, and I need this to work and solve ABC problem because it's my neck on the line. That's when you come back with the calibrated question is, okay, but if we don't move forward, how are you thinking about the cost of not fixing this? Or, so what would happen if you don't actually make the decision though, and you have the same problem over the next 6 months? In just 3 sentences, you've guided the conversation, lowered the emotional temperature of the conversation, and opened up the buyer to tell you exactly what they need from here. When you step back, you'll notice something really important just happened. Without pressure, without pitching, you guided the conversation to exactly where you wanted it to go. Overall, the big takeaway is this isn't about persuading more or listening more. It's about talking less and steering better. Because talking tries to move people, but questions and listening lets them move themselves. People trust the conclusions that they come to themselves. So this creates a bigger question. If listening is how you guide decisions, then timing becomes everything. In all of this, where does follow-up fit? Is follow-up annoying or is it essential? Where's the line between being respectful and letting a deal die? And that's what we're going to break down in our next video.